2.txt An old mechanic helped Hell's Angels one rainy night. What came at dawn moved him deeply. If I cannot stop this by morning, I lose the shop my father built. The defeated, trembling whisper of 72-year-old Elias Vance barely cut through the relentless rain drumming against the corrugated metal roof. At 11:42 on a freezing Tuesday night, the exhausted mechanic stood in his dim garage, clutching a grease-stained final notice, property lien, and exactly $42 in his pocket. "The county tax office opens at dawn," he muttered, his eyes squeezing shut as the countdown tightened around his chest. "Once they move this file forward, I do not know how to stop it." That was when a heavy knock rattled the bay doors, followed by the low, coughing silence of a dead motorcycle outside. Eli froze, shoved the notice beneath his ledger, and pulled the door open just wide enough to see Silas Stone, Thorne standing in the rain, his Hell's Angels leather vest creaking under the weight of the storm. Behind Stone, through the rain-streaked opening, Eli saw them, a line of powerful motorcycles, their chrome gleaming even in the dim street lamp light, and a group of men in leather, their forms imposing and still. One of the bikes, a sleek custom chopper, was clearly in distress, its rider pushing it forward through the mud, its engine dead, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. Eli's first instinct was a familiar weariness, a deep-seated desire to hide the lean and simply be left alone. It was late, his world was collapsing, and these were not his usual customers. He had heard stories about groups like the Hell's Angels, and their reputation preceded them like a shadow of unease. But then, he looked at Stone's weathered face and saw the genuine struggle of the rider pushing the broken bike, the freezing rain soaking through their heavy leather. A lifetime of helping people in trouble, regardless of who they were or what they looked like, kicked in, overriding his apprehension and his own despair. He let out a long sigh, quickly shoving the final notice into his pocket. He pushed his spectacles higher on his nose, wiped his hands one last time on a rag that was more grease than cloth, and faced the imposing leader. He would not turn anyone away, not on a night like this, not when someone truly needed help. "Evening, gentlemen," Eli called out, his voice gruff but steady, carrying a surprising authority as he stood fully in the warm, cluttered interior of his shop, a beacon in the stormy night. "Looks like you are in a spot of trouble." Eli watched as Stone, with a curt nod of thanks, guided the broken chopper into the bay, the wet tires leaving dark, shimmering tracks on the oil-stained concrete floor. The other bikers, a silent, imposing group, parked their machines just inside the open door, sheltering from the relentless downpour, their presence filling the large space with an unfamiliar energy. Eli, despite his earlier weariness, felt the familiar pull of a puzzle to solve, the challenge of a broken machine igniting a spark within him. He grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from his workbench, its powerful beam cutting through the shop's dim, shadow-draped light, and began his methodical inspection. His movements were not fast, they were deliberate, each step precise, each touch of the engine block informed by decades of experience, a lifetime spent understanding the language of metal and mechanics. Stone stood a few feet away, leaning against his own bike, his arms crossed over his chest, watching Eli with an intensity that Eli felt more than saw, a silent, assessing gaze. The rain continued to lash against the corrugated metal roof, a constant, drumming rhythm that made conversation difficult, yet paradoxically filled the silence between them with a shared atmosphere. Eli ran his gloved hand over the cold metal of the engine, his fingers searching for the telltale signs of trouble, the subtle vibrations or misplaced components that whispered of a fault. He pulled out a small, well-worn multimeter from his toolbox, its wires frayed but functional, a testament to its long service, and began testing connections with practiced ease. "Looks like a real mess, this one," Eli mumbled, more to himself than to Stone, his voice a low rumble over the rain. "Electrical, I reckon. Always the fiddliest kind, the ones that hide their secrets." He reached for a heavy, ancient wrench, its handle smooth and polished from years of use, a tool he affectionately called OL Reliable, passed down from his own father. The weight of it felt good in his hand, a solid connection to the past, to the legacy he was trying so hard to preserve. Stone's keen eyes followed the wrench, then returned to Eli's hands. He noticed the deep calluses, The faint scars that crisscrossed his knuckles, the way Eli's fingers, though gnarled with age, moved with an almost surgical grace around the engine's components, a dance of expertise. There was a quiet dedication in Eli's work, a reverence for the machinery that spoke volumes, a deep respect for his craft. Eli grumbled about the late hour, the persistent rain, and the general inconvenience of a broken-down bike on a Tuesday night, but his actions belied his words. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his breath misting slightly in the cool shop air, a small cloud of focus. He was a man lost in his craft, the world outside, even the imposing figures of the Hells Angels, fading into the background of his singular purpose. Stone saw this, the deep, almost spiritual connection between the old mechanic and his work. It reminded him of someone he once knew, an old mentor whose hands had worked with the same quiet dignity, the same unwavering commitment. Eli straightened up, pushing his glasses up his nose, a sigh escaping his lips, a release of held breath. "This is not going to be a quick fix, boys," he announced, turning to Stone, his voice carrying clearly now. "Looks like we are in for a long night, maybe until dawn." Stone simply nodded, his expression unreadable in the dimness, but a flicker of something in his eyes suggested understanding, perhaps even a nascent respect for the old man's dedication. The rain showed no signs of stopping, mirroring the long, uncertain hours stretching ahead. Eli settled in for the long haul, the complex electrical fault demanding his full, undivided attention. He removed the bike's fairing, revealing a tangled nest of wires, fuses, and relays, a daunting puzzle for less experienced hands. The rhythmic clang of his tools, a careful tap here, a precise twist there, a soft click as a connection was secured, became the only sound in the shop, punctuated by the relentless drumming of the rain outside. He worked with a quiet intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration, his breath a soft plume in the cool, damp air, his focus absolute. Stone and hammer, initially just silent observers, shifted their weight, their imposing figures casting long, dancing shadows in the shop's poor light. After a while, Hammer, a burly man with observant eyes, seeing Eli struggle to reach a particularly awkward connection deep within the engine's housing, stepped forward. Without a word, he picked up a heavy-duty work light Eli had set aside and held it, directing its bright, focused beam exactly where Eli needed it, illuminating the hidden wires. Eli paused, surprised by the unexpected assistance, then offered a curt nod of thanks, a small acknowledgement of their growing, unspoken cooperation. A few minutes later, Stone, noticing Eli fumbling for a specific screwdriver in his cluttered toolbox, anticipated the need and handed him the correct tool, its handle worn smooth. It was a small gesture, but it spoke of an unexpected attentiveness, a quiet understanding of the mechanic's rhythm. Eli accepted it, a flicker of something akin to gratitude passing over his tired face, a softening of his usual guarded demeanor. The shared task, the quiet cooperation in the late hours, began to chip away at Eli's usual gruffness. He found himself talking, not in a rush, but in fragments, as his hands continued their intricate work. "My father, he built this place, brick by brick, with his own 2 hands," Eli mumbled, gesturing vaguely with a wire stripper towards the sturdy, if aging, cinder block walls. "Taught me everything I know," said a man's word and his work were the only things that truly mattered in this world. He paused, connecting 2 wires with a practiced twist, then added, his voice tinged with a distant pride. "He painted that sign himself, you know. Vance's Auto Repair. Took him a whole weekend, meticulously tracing each letter." Eli glanced towards the large bay door, where the faded, hand-painted sign was just visible through the rain-streaked glass, a ghost of its former vibrant self, its colors muted by time and weather. It was more than just a sign. It was a symbol, a promise, a heavy burden he carried. "Hard to keep it running now," Eli continued, his voice barely above a whisper, the words escaping him almost against his will, a confession to the night. "Takes more than just fixing engines these days, more than just turning a wrench." He did not elaborate, but the unspoken weight of his words hung in the air, a palpable sense of struggle and impending loss. Stone and Hammer exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. They understood the sentiment, the quiet pride in a legacy, and the deep fear of watching it fade away, of losing something built with blood and sweat. Eli, focused on reassembling a particularly tricky part of the electrical system, did not notice their intense, lingering stare. He was too deep in his work, and too deep in the quiet ache of his own worries, to see the way their eyes lingered on the shop, on the faded sign, and on him, a man unknowingly revealing his deepest fears. Eli continued his meticulous work, the complex wiring slowly yielding to his experienced hands, each connection a small victory. He felt the familiar ache in his lower back, a constant companion these days, a dull throb that spoke of years spent hunched over engines, but the satisfaction of solving a difficult problem kept him going, fueled by stubborn pride. The rain outside had settled into a steady drone, a monotonous backdrop to the quiet hum of his concentration, a constant reminder of the late hour. He had been working on engines longer than Stone had been alive, and each repair was a small victory against the relentless march of time and decay, a testament to enduring skill. He thought about the faded sign again, the one his father had painted with such care. It was not just paint chipping away. It felt like his own hold on the place, on his legacy, was eroding, too. The words he had spoken earlier, hard to keep it running now, felt like a heavy truth, a weight he carried alone, a secret burden. Stone, meanwhile, had moved from leaning against his bike to a small, worn stool near the workbench, his presence still imposing, but less overtly watchful, more contemplative. He observed Eli's every move, the way the old man squinted at diagrams, his lips moving silently as he traced circuits, the precise flick of his wrist as he tightened a connection. His gaze drifted around the cluttered shop, taking in the stacks of old tires, the shelves overflowing with parts, the dusty trophies from local racing circuits long past, each item a relic of a bygone era. Then, his eyes landed on a small, narrow door set into the back wall, almost hidden behind a tall stack of oil drums and forgotten boxes. It was Eli's office, a cramped space barely larger than a closet, its door slightly ajar, revealing a glimpse of its chaotic interior. Inside, a single bare bulb cast a dim, yellow light on a chaotic collection of papers, old calendars, and tools scattered across a rickety desk. Stone's eyes scanned the bulletin board tacked to the back of the office door. It was a jumble of faded notices, yellowed receipts, and forgotten appointments. But one document, partially obscured by a curling calendar from 2 years ago, caught his attention. It was a standard-sized legal paper, its edges crisp despite the surrounding clutter, standing out starkly. He could clearly make out the official-looking county seal at the top. Below it, in bold, stark lettering, were the words, "Property lien." And further down, even more chillingly, "Final notice." Beneath those words, in smaller type, was a balance that made the paper feel heavier than metal. $14,863.72, with the foreclosure file scheduled to move forward Friday at 5 p.m. unless Eli filed an extension request when the tax office opened that morning. The shop his father built would be almost impossible to save. Stone felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, a visceral reaction. He knew enough about the world, about the quiet struggles people faced, to understand what those words meant, the dire implications they carried. This was not just about an old man struggling to keep a business afloat. This was about a man on the verge of losing everything, his home, his livelihood, his father's legacy. Eli's quiet comment about the shop being hard to keep running was a profound understatement, a desperate, silent battle he was fighting alone. Stone's gaze hardened, no longer merely observing, but processing, assessing, a plan beginning to form in his mind. He glanced back at Eli, who was now hunched over the bike, soldering 2 delicate wires together, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration, completely absorbed. Eli's face was etched with fatigue, but his focus was absolute, his world narrowed to the task at hand. He did not notice Stone's intense stare, nor the direction of his gaze towards the small, dusty office. Eli was lost in the immediate task, unaware that his unspoken struggle had just been laid bare to a stranger who now understood far more than Eli could ever imagine, a stranger who had a code about debts. Eli finally tightened the last bolt, a soft, metallic click echoing in the now quiet shop, a sound of completion. The rain had dwindled to a light drizzle, a gentle tapping against the roof, signaling the approaching dawn, painting the sky with faint streaks of gray and rose. He wiped his hands on a greasy rag, then pushed himself upright, a groan escaping his lips as his back protested the long hours spent bent over the engine. He moved to the ignition, his heart thumping with a mix of exhaustion and anticipation, a nervous flutter. He had spent the entire night on this repair, pouring every ounce of his skill and stubbornness into it, refusing to be beaten. He turned the key, and with a satisfying roar, Hammer's chopper sprang to life, the engine purring smoothly, a testament to Eli's practiced hands, a beautiful symphony of mechanical precision. Eli felt a surge of quiet pride, a familiar feeling that always followed a job well done, a deep satisfaction that momentarily eclipsed his weariness. "There you go, boys," Eli announced, his voice rough but triumphant, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "She is running like new, purring like a kitten." Stone and Hammer approached, their faces unreadable in the dim, pre-dawn light, but the slight relaxation in their posture suggested a profound relief, a burden lifted. Stone nodded, a silent acknowledgement of Eli's expertise, a genuine respect in his eyes. "How much do we owe you, old man?" Stone asked, his voice low, pulling Eli back to the practicalities. Eli, already reaching for his worn ledger, scribbled a figure. It was a fair price for the hours of work, the specialized knowledge, and the late-night service, but it was less than he truly deserved, less than he desperately needed. He knew that, but he could not bring himself to charge more. It was his way, his unwritten code. Stone pulled out a thick wad of bills, more than enough for the repair, a generous amount. "Here, take this," he said, pushing extra cash towards Eli. "For your trouble, and the late hour. You earned it." Eli shook his head, pushing the extra money back across the counter. "No need. That is the price. Take it or leave it." His gruffness was a shield, protecting him from both charity and pity, preserving his hard-won dignity. Stone held his gaze for a moment, a silent understanding passing between them, then slowly put the extra money back into his pocket. He understood Eli's pride, a stubborn refusal to accept anything he did not feel he had earned. As Hammer wheeled the now functional chopper out of the bay, its engine rumbling softly, Stone lingered for a moment. He glanced towards Eli's office door, his eyes briefly finding the county notice, half hidden but still visible, a stark reminder. Eli was busy putting away his tools, his back to Stone, completely unaware of the biker's focused gaze. Stone did not lift his phone. He waited until Eli shut the ledger, then looked toward the office door and spoke quietly. "That county paper on your board," he said. "Is it a final notice?" Eli's shoulders stiffened as if Stone had touched a bruise. For a second, his pride looked ready to slam the door between them. Then he looked at the repaired chopper, at the fair payment on the counter, and at the shop his father had built with his own hands. "Tax lien," Eli admitted, his voice rough. "Final notice." Stone nodded once. "I know a woman who understands county offices. Let me send her a photo, only if you say so." Eli hesitated, then walked into the office, pulled the notice from the bulletin board himself, and laid it on the counter. "One photo," he said. "No pity." Stone took the picture in plain sight and handed the notice back. "Thank you, Eli," Stone said, his voice carrying a deeper weight than usual, a promise unspoken. "We will not forget this. You did us a good turn." Eli merely grunted, waving a dismissive hand as Stone mounted his bike. The other Hells Angels, who had been waiting patiently, started their engines, the combined roar filling the shop for a moment, then fading as they pulled out, disappearing into the pre-dawn gloom, their tail lights vanishing around the bend. Eli watched them go, a strange mix of relief and emptiness washing over him. The shop was quiet again, too quiet. He had fixed their bike, but his own problems remained, looming larger than ever in the profound silence. He was alone, and the weight of the lien felt heavier than any wrench he had lifted all night, a crushing burden that had not been fixed. Stone and Hammer rode off into the pre-dawn gloom, the roar of their engines slowly fading into the quiet of the rural highway, leaving only the sound of the persistent drizzle. Eli stood in his shop doorway, watching the last tail light disappear, then slowly, heavily, pulled the large bay door shut, the metal groaning in protest, a sound that echoed his own weariness. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the drip of water from the eaves and the distant chirping of early birds, a stark contrast to the thrumming engines. He felt a hollow ache in his chest, a familiar companion that always returned after the adrenaline of a difficult repair wore off, leaving him exposed. The brief distraction of the Hells Angels, their unexpected presence, had momentarily pushed his own worries aside, a temporary reprieve. Now, with them gone, the crushing weight of the property lien returned, amplified by the loneliness of the empty shop, the cold reality of his situation. He walked slowly through the bays, collecting scattered tools, his movements stiff and tired, each step a small effort. The image of the final notice on his office bulletin board flashed in his mind, a constant, nagging dread that gnawed at his peace. He knew he should be grateful for the payment, but it felt like a single drop in a rapidly emptying bucket, a temporary patch on a gaping wound. He was alone, and the fight to save his father's legacy, the very foundation of his life, felt impossible, an insurmountable battle. Meanwhile, Stone, instead of heading straight back to their clubhouse, pulled his bike over at a small, brightly lit roadside diner a few miles down the highway, its neon sign a beacon in the fading darkness. Hammer followed, parking his chopper beside Stone's, the engines cooling with soft clicks. The diner was already bustling with early morning truckers and a few local farmers, the warm, inviting smell of coffee and bacon filling the air, a stark contrast to the damp outside. Stone found a quiet booth in the back, away from the main chatter, seeking a moment of privacy. He pulled out his phone, the screen illuminating his weathered face, his eyes narrowed in concentration. He zoomed in on the photo Eli had allowed him to take. The stark words, property lien, final notice, and $14,863.72 due by Friday at 5 p.m., clear and unforgiving, a digital testament to the old man's plight. He took a deep breath, then scrolled through his contacts, his thumb pausing on a name he knew he could trust, Ms. Albright Law. He pressed the call button, the ring echoing faintly in the noisy diner. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Albright, she stated, her voice clear despite the early hour, sharp and alert. Ms. Albright, it is Stone, he said, keeping his voice low, glancing around the diner to ensure discretion. I have a situation. An old mechanic, out near Harmony Creek. Eli Vance. He helped us out tonight, really went above and beyond, fixed Hammer's bike when no one else would. He paused, then continued, his voice firm with purpose. He is sitting on a property lien, final notice. He allowed me to photograph the document, and I am sending it to you now. I think he is about to lose his shop, his home, and his entire life's work. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, his expression grim, absorbing her questions and advice. He knew Ms. Albright, a retired lawyer who often lent her expertise to those in their network who needed legal help, especially when it involved navigating complex bureaucracy and fighting for the underdog. She had a reputation for cutting through red tape and achieving results. Stone ended the call, a flicker of resolve in his eyes, a plan solidifying. He sent the photo, then ordered a black coffee, his mind already working on the next steps, the intricate details of how to help. Eli Vance had done them a good turn, a kindness extended without question. Now it was their turn to pay it back, in a way that truly mattered, a debt of honor. Eli woke hours later, the first week, watery light of dawn barely piercing the heavy, dust-laden curtains of his small apartment above the shop. The familiar dread was already a cold, tight knot in his stomach, a constant companion since the county notice had arrived, a shadow that never left him. The brief, intense work of the night before, the unexpected presence of Stone and his club, had been a temporary distraction, a fleeting escape, but now the profound silence of the morning amplified his worries, making them loom larger. He swung his legs out of bed, his joints protesting with aches and stiffness, and shuffled to the tiny kitchen. The smell of brewing coffee, strong and black, was the only comfort he could find, its warmth a small solace in the cold grip of his fear. He poured himself a mug, the warmth seeping into his hands, but it did little to thaw the chill in his heart, the deep-seated anxiety that resided there. He walked to the window, a ritual he had performed for decades, expecting only the usual quiet stretch of rural highway, perhaps a lone car passing by, a solitary start to the day. The road was always empty at this hour, a peaceful, if lonely, beginning to his routine. But today was different. His eyes, still adjusting to the dim, gray light, widened slightly, a sudden jolt of alarm. A line of motorcycles, powerful and gleaming even in the muted light, was pulling up to his shop. His heart sank, a heavy stone dropping into his chest, a sickening lurch. It was them, the Hells Angels. And Stone's large black touring bike was at the head of the line, unmistakable. A wave of exhaustion, tinged with a fresh surge of apprehension, washed over him, making his knees feel weak. He had just gotten rid of them, or so he thought, a fleeting sense of relief. What could they possibly want now? Had he made a mistake? Had he charged too little, or perhaps too much? His mind raced, searching for a reason, for an explanation, but finding only a growing sense of unease, a tightening in his chest. He watched as they dismounted, their leather jackets dark against the pale morning sky, their movements unhurried and purposeful. Stone, recognizable even from this distance, was leading the way, his gaze fixed on the shop. But then, Eli saw something that made him pause, his brow furrowing in confusion, a wrinkle of bewilderment. Stone was not alone. Beside him walked a woman, dressed in a neat business suit, her posture straight and professional, her silver hair pulled back in a tidy bun. In her hand, she carried a slim, official-looking folder, its contents unknown. Eli squinted, trying to make sense of the scene, his mind struggling to connect the disparate images. A lawyer? With the Hells Angels? It did not compute, defied all his expectations. His fear, which had been building steadily, now mingled with a profound bewilderment, a sense of utter disorientation. This was not the kind of trouble he had anticipated, not the usual mechanical breakdown or late-night rowdy behavior. This was something entirely new, entirely unexpected, and he could not begin to guess what it meant, what this strange dawn visitation portended for him. Eli descended the creaking stairs from his apartment, each step a testament to his 72 years, his mind still reeling from the strange sight outside. The smell of old oil and coffee hung heavy in the shop air, a familiar comfort now tinged with uncertainty, a scent that usually brought him peace. He pushed open the door leading into the main bay, his gaze immediately drawn to the group of bikers standing patiently near the entrance, their presence less intimidating in the soft morning light. Stone stepped forward, his expression unreadable, but there was a quiet purpose in his eyes, a determined resolve. Beside him, the woman in the business suit offered a small, polite smile, her demeanor calm and professional. She was Ms. Albright, her silver hair neatly pulled back, her posture radiating quiet authority. "Eli Vance, I presume?" she asked, her voice clear and steady, extending a hand that was surprisingly firm. Eli, still a little stunned, shook her hand, his own calloused fingers feeling rough against her smooth, cool skin. "Yes, that is me," he managed, his voice a little hoarse, betraying his surprise. "What is all this about? What can I do for you?" Stone stepped in, his voice low but firm, a reassuring presence. "Eli, Ms. Albright here is a lawyer. She is going to help you with that county notice, the property lien." Eli's eyes widened, his gaze darting from Stone to Ms. Albright, then to the official-looking folder she held. He felt a flush of embarrassment, quickly followed by a surge of confused anger. How did they know? He had not told anyone, had kept his struggle a closely guarded secret. Ms. Albright, sensing his discomfort, spoke gently, her voice soothing. "Mr. Vance, we understand this is unexpected, perhaps even a shock. Stone showed me the notice you allowed him to send. I reviewed it before sunrise, checked the county procedures, prepared the extension request, and left a message with the tax office the moment their line opened this morning." She opened her folder, revealing several printed documents, official forms, and legal correspondence. "It is a property tax lien, as you know. The good news is, while serious, it is not irreversible. First, we file a hardship extension request before Friday. Second, we organize your repair receipts, utility records, and property tax correspondence. Third, we ask the county to review the penalties and set a payment plan you can actually survive." She placed 3 forms on the workbench, each one marked with a yellow sticky note. This does not erase the debt, Mr. Vance, but it can stop the county from treating a frightened man like a file number. Her words were practical, grounded, and offered a lifeline where Eli had only seen a dead end, a glimmer of hope. Eli listened, his initial shock slowly giving way to a dawning comprehension, a profound realization. They were not here to cause trouble. They were here to help, to offer a way out. Stone then spoke again, his voice softer now, his expression earnest. And we are here to help you get this place in order, Eli. Hammer and the boys are good with their hands. We brought storage boxes, trash bags, work lights, coffee, and breakfast because nobody should fight a county deadline on an empty stomach. Hammer stepped forward and set Eli's old wrench, reliable, gently on the workbench, not as a tool being returned, but as a reminder that the shop still had work left to do. We can help you sort through your paperwork, clean up the shop, patch what needs patching, and make the place presentable before that meeting. Years of neglect can pile up until a man thinks the fight is already over. It is not. He gestured around the cluttered shop, not with judgment, but with an understanding nod, a shared recognition of the burden. Eli looked at their faces and no longer saw the frightening strangers he had imagined in the rain. He saw men offering help without making him beg for it. His eyes stung, hot and unexpected, and for a moment he could not find a single word that did not break in his throat. So he simply nodded, one tear cutting a clean path through the grease on his cheek. He accepted their help, his dignity not diminished, but quietly restored. Over the next few weeks, the quiet hum of Eli's shop changed, taking on a new, purposeful rhythm. The initial shock of the Hells Angels' unexpected return had given way to a steady, organized effort, a testament to their commitment. Ms. Albright, true to her word, stayed with him through every form, phone call, receipt, and county meeting. She did not make the problem vanish. She made it understandable, one deadline and one signature at a time. Eli, still somewhat bewildered by the turn of events, found himself actively participating, learning about the intricacies of property law that he had ignored for years, understanding the system that had almost claimed his legacy. He gathered old receipts, dug out faded invoices from dusty boxes, and listened intently as Ms. Albright patiently explained the nuances of tax appeals and payment plans, empowering him with knowledge. Meanwhile, Stone, Hammer, and a few other members of the club, true to their word, descended upon Vance's auto repair. They did not just clean, they meticulously organized. Dust motes, undisturbed for decades, danced in the sunlight that now streamed through newly washed windows, illuminating the rejuvenated space. Tools found their proper places on pegboards, shelves were cleared of forgotten parts, and the floor, once slick with oil and grime, was scrubbed until the concrete gleamed, revealing its original texture. Hammer, with surprising precision and patience, helped Eli sort through boxes of old paperwork in the office, creating order out of chaos, filing documents that had been lost for years. Stone, with a quiet efficiency, even helped repair a leaky section of the roof, a persistent problem Eli had put off for years, patching it with expert hands. The shop, once a monument to slow decay, began to breathe again, becoming a functional, welcoming space, a testament to collective effort. Eli, working alongside them, felt a profound shift within himself. The loneliness that had been his constant companion slowly began to recede, replaced by a sense of belonging, a quiet camaraderie he had not known he needed, a feeling of being part of something larger. He saw them not as the frightening strangers he had imagined in the rain, but as men who kept their word, understood the value of a legacy, and knew how to help without making a man feel small. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of phone calls, paperwork, and meetings, Ms. Albright delivered the first real good news. The county had accepted a manageable payment plan, paused the foreclosure process, and agreed to review several penalties that had been added without proper notice. The debt had not vanished, and Eli did not pretend it had. But the deadline had stopped looking like a wall and started looking like a road. Eli's shop was safe for now. He stood in the middle of his transformed shop, the scent of fresh cleaner mixing with the old oil that would always belong there, and looked at the faded Vance's Auto Repair sign above the bay door. It was still faded, still hand-painted, but now it stood over a place with renewed purpose. On the workbench below it, OL Reliable rested where his father used to leave it, its worn handle catching the morning light. For the first time in months, Eli did not see an old wrench and a dying sign. He saw proof that some legacies only need hands willing to lift them again. He had his legacy, his home, and a new, unexpected community that had rallied around him. In the months that followed, Eli often saw Stone and Hammer pass by on the highway. Sometimes they stopped for coffee. Sometimes they brought a stubborn engine, a cracked belt, or a young rider who needed to learn the difference between noise and care. Eli always waved from beneath the faded sign, OL Reliable resting on the bench behind him, his shop no longer silent in the mornings. He had not become young again, but he had become part of the road outside his door, and for the first time in years, the road answered back. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.